How would you define the word influence for our listeners and our viewers, please, Andrew?
Gee, that's a good warm-up question if I've ever heard one. I think influence is, I guess it's an impact that you can have on a group of people, whether they're stakeholders in your business, employees, whether they're your clients, whether they're your family. It's a very, very significant force that you can have. And I think it's something you've got to exercise with a very deliberate and intentional approach.
Welcome to the Find Your Influence podcast with Anton Guinea, where we unpack all things influence and we help leaders particularly find their influence by talking to amazing humans and finding out what influence means to them, who they've been influenced by and who they have influenced. And this podcast episode proudly sponsored by the Guinea Group of companies. The Guinea Group helps leaders upgrade, upskill, uplift their teams and their influence. Welcome to the Find Your Influence podcast with Anton Guinea. Thank you so much for all our listeners and viewers for joining us today. Fantastic chat coming up. Just such an amazing human. Andrew Baxter is the CEO. Andrew is a financial educator, a best-selling author and investor from Byron Bay. Andrew is a distinguished leader in the financial education and investment industry with more than 25 years of experience as a professional trader, mentor, and business founder. Andrew is the CEO of AIE, otherwise known as Australian Investment Education. Andrew is one of Australia's foremost financial education service providers, helping everyday people gain control of their finances to build sustainable wealth and to make confident investment decisions. Andrew's mission is to empower individuals with practical, real-world financial skills that go far beyond the textbook. Andrew's career began in the heart of the global finance sector in London, where he developed deep expertise in trading, risk management, and wealth creation. After relocating to Australia, he translated decades of institutional and retail market experience into a mission to educate and inspire others about investing and creating financial independence. Welcome, Andrew Baxter. So, mate, thanks again. Influence. How would you define the word influence for our listeners and our viewers, please, Andrew?
Gee, that's a good warm-up question if I've ever heard one. I think influence is, I guess it's an impact that you can have on a group of people, whether they're stakeholders in your business, employees, whether they're your clients, whether they're your family, and it's a very, very significant force that you can have, and I think it's something you've got to exercise with a very deliberate and intentional approach.
Right, because influence misused could be quite negative, right?
Absolutely. And being in the sort of education and coaching space, you can take people down a wrong path very, very quickly if you exert your influence in a way that's not a force for good. Likewise with your kids, you don't want to steal their thunder. You want to give them the ability to grow and grow in their confidence, and maybe being a little heavy-handed in the way that you wield your influence as a parent can sometimes take a little bit of the wind out of their sails and I guess stymie them from a development perspective too.
Well said. And it's a key leadership skill. It's also a key parent skill to be able to influence. And we always say, Andrew, positively with that right mindset. And I love the word impact that you use, because most of our podcast guests, when I say the word influence, use either impact or the word inspiration with it. And I think they're elements of influence as well.
Very much so, yeah.
Mate, big question. And Julie and I, so we've got a little bet going on this. And for all of our listeners and viewers, Andrew is a service provider to us. Andrew helps us significantly with our financial situation. Please reach out to AIE if you want more information. I'll put Andrew's link below. But Jules and I have got a bet going on who you're going to say the most influential person in your life was, because Jules says she's heard you talk about this person a lot. Andrew Baxter, who has influenced you the most during your journey?
There are a lot of people that have, so it's really hard to package that. If I can ask a favor and maybe have two lenses to look through. One, I think personally, and one professionally, if we can do that. And I think personally would almost certainly have to be my parents. The driving impact that they've had on me from a young kid, giving me the confidence to have a crack at life. And I think probably most importantly, the work ethic that they instilled in me, I think, tremendously important impacts to have. If you're prepared to outwork anyone, you'll win the game. It's as simple as that. Obviously, the more directed that work is, the better. So my parents, I can't speak highly enough in terms of helping me grow. And I wouldn't say just in the early part of my career. My dad's over with us at the moment here in Australia, and from a parenting perspective, I've got 6 kids. My kids are all pretty young, 11 through to 10 months. And, I don't think you get the ability to be a great parent until you become a grandparent, because you've more time, more wisdom, and you're out of the trenches. And so, he's still mentoring me and having an impact on me now. He's 83. I'm not going to disclose my age, but it's not my first rodeo either. And so he's still having a very positive and massive impact on my life. That's my dad.
At 83. Can I just ask, just on that, the one story that Julie really remembers, Andrew, from your dad was a mechanic, I think, by trade?
Yeah, he worked in a car factory. He was a press mechanic, worked on the production line, yeah.
Cool. And he used to get as many overtime shifts as possible to pay your house off as soon as possible to be debt-free. Was that right?
100%. Yep. My mum worked as a cleaner, just to help with the household budget. And my father, he'd take any amount of overtime that was available at the factory. If he couldn't do that, he'd work on a building site. If it wasn't available, he'd labor on a farm. And I used to tag along with him, great father-son bonding time. Slave labor, I guess, is another way you could describe it. But yeah, and I think, again, as a parent, you realize that, kids all want time with you. And so for me and him, that was fantastic when I was younger, even if I was carrying bricks up a ladder or crawling around in a car with him or doing something like that,
Wow. Mate, I love it. Thank you so much.
Hardworking man.
Hardworking.
And still is too. He's 83. He's been retired since he's 57 with some pretty good investing, and he got out of the game. And we've put him to work on our farm. He's of that generation that never sits still. But I think professionally, that's a hard one, because a lot of people have come into my life at various times. People like Tony Robbins. I think Robert Kiyosaki are two that aren't name drops. They're people I've worked with intimately over the last 25 years. I've spoken alongside both of them on a number of occasions. We've worked with groups of clients together and so on. And they've both had a really, I think, profound impact. And if I were to pick one, I'd say Robert, purely and simply, for me, even though I've had an entire career in financial services, you don't know everything about everything. And I was an employee when I started my career in London. I'm sure we'll get into what I used to do. And learning about being self-employed or a business owner and then into an investor, and the change of dynamic that comes with that, I think was a true game changer for me, because nobody had taught me that. I learned it from Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then I spent a heap of time on the road with him, speaking to his clients at different places around the globe for about 15 years. So yeah, it's very, very interesting, sort of full circle from having a mentor to actually being alongside them on stage to then mentoring their clients.
Wow. And this was before AIE, yeah?
Oh, this was in our early days, when I probably had a little bit more hair. I think it's, and that for us was, where we moved from being, quite a small player in the market, where we're doing, little boardroom things, to really going global and talking to, tens of thousands of people in one sitting, which is a massive buzz. And from an ego perspective, if I'm brutally honest, I mean, you walk out on stage and there's, 10,000 people in an auditorium, you feel like a rock star. But at the same time, the small stuff is where you build a real connection with people, because you're eyeballing people in the room instead of just looking at this huge sea of faces. And we're in the money industry, which is ultimately also the trust industry. So you have to have a genuine connection with people, because you're asking them to invest and they need to trust you in that decision. And sometimes in those small groups, you don't hear someone, you feel them. Where you look someone dead set in the eyeballs, you go, okay, this is real. This isn't someone reading from a script or knocking out a couple of PowerPoints. I get where this person is coming from. So sometimes big groups are good, but sometimes in those smaller groups, you can really, really connect, which I think is hugely important.
Absolutely. And that connection gives you the ability, I think, Andrew, to influence the right decisions that are best for your client. When you've got the right intent, you're happy to share what you think is right for them. And no one's ever going to buy anything from us. What is it? Know, like, and trust.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you have to come at this with a level of intention. And I think sometimes with those larger events, if I look sort of back over my last sort of 25 years and some of those crazy things that we've done around the world, they can become, without sounding too cynical, quite commercial, where there's an expectation of outcome. Whether that's always right for the person is another matter. And integrity, intention, influence, and impact has to come from the right place. And if something's not right for someone, you've got to be honest and tell them that and say, look, I understand you're hungry for this, but now's not your time. Go away, do this, do that. Come back and see me if you need to. Or this is flat out not for you. It's just not for you. Go find something else that is more in line with what your needs or values or confidence or attitude to risk might be. So, learning to say no is quite hard to do when you're confronted by, 10,000 people. When you're in a room with 30, 40 people, you can very much operate that way. And I think that's key, A, from an integrity perspective, and B, for longevity of your business, because you build a reputation for no BS and delivering on what you intend, as opposed to just trying to mop up a commercial outcome.
Mate, beautifully put. And just for our listeners and viewers, my wife, who I, listen to, she's actually my favorite school teacher ever, Andrew, which is really cool. And it just speaks so highly of yourself and your brand, and that integrity piece says that there's no one that she's ever dealt with who stands by, steps up, and does what they say they're going to do. So that call at the same time every week, she says, is never late. Like every single week, on the dot, on point, and just so reliable, I guess would be the right word. And so what AIE says and what Andrew Baxter's team say they're going to do, they do. So that's, and I love it.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that feedback. And I think that's a huge part of integrity. Say what you mean what you say, and deliver on it.
No, you should be proud, mate. You should be really proud. And I know that you would be. Sometimes it's good to hear it from a client perspective. And
no, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And it gets harder as your business grows. We've got tens of thousands of clients, and I think maintaining client service, lots of companies can emulate what you do to an extent. They can copy your product, they can copy your advertising, but copying service is very hard, because you're either interested in delivering great service, or it's just a tagline on an advert. Oh, we give great services. Garbage. You've got to deliver it. And intention and implementation, I think, is key.
I love it. And they also say, Andrew, that people can copy how you do your business, but they can't copy the why.
That's exactly
what's really deep for you, and that's that purpose. Actually, what is your why? What's the purpose of it?
You're going well, Anton. You took a little while to get the engine running, and now you're bringing out the big questions. It's a very philosophical question, I think, to ask. It's also very timely, because as we start the new year, it's always good to sit down and think, well, okay, what do I want out of the year, and why do I want it? For me, I think my journey of fulfillment, and certainly in a professional capacity, to leave my personal life aside for the minute, I think where I really started to enjoy personal growth and fulfillment was when I stopped focusing on building my personal wealth, which I'd amassed quite a considerable amount of, and actually focused on helping other people to do that. And I think the sort of genesis about the start of that for me, probably if I look back, I'm from a very working class background. We had no money when I was a kid, very happy childhood. And everyone was the same in the little railway town I grew up in. So there was none of this sort of, there's the big end of town where everyone was a very working class town. And I think coming from that background and I guess achieving on most benchmarks, a decent level of success, giving something back or opening the door for other people, so that even if they don't initially have the courage to try and work it out for themselves, there's a pathway, if you're open-minded, that you can take and commit to. And if you do, it's a time-tested and proven pathway. But it's not our job to convince people that the sun rises in the east. You've got to want to do that for yourself. So I think, for a large extent, that was my initial why. And it's just grown on the back of our business success. And, when you hear the case studies from our clients as to how they've gone and what they've achieved and what it means to them in terms of buying their time back. I have one particular client who he was trading very nicely. He's made a couple $100,000 a year from what he was doing. And his wife was still working because she'd stopped to have a family. So her super was, a lower balance. The retirement income wasn't the same. And he took his proceeds from his training to roll into his wife's super to buy her time back so that they could travel together. And money doesn't buy happiness. What it does is buy your time back so you can spend your time doing things that make you happy. And that's something that's really important to understand. On its own, it won't make you happy. You set a goal, I did make $1 million. I did. Was I happy? No. I want to make 10. I made 10. Did it make me happy? No. But what it did enable me to do is to start to buy my time back and just spend the time doing the things that were important to me. So I became more fulfilled and by definition became happy. The conundrum of it all.
Beautifully put. Beautifully. Now you're on a roll. Nailing it. I love the answers. And it all started, if I got this right too, with a little unit purchase in that little town. Was it in that town where you bought your first unit that you...
Yep. My first property was actually in London. And that's one that kind of irks me a little bit because, we're in a situation, particularly here in Australia, where, the property market is expensive, but it's also the lens that people look through as to what they can do. I can't afford to buy. No, you can't afford to buy where you want to live. You can afford to buy, but your ego won't let you do that. You want to buy where you want to live. And decisions, especially financial decisions, or even personal decisions for that matter, if they're made on the basis of ego, in my experience, certainly, they very seldom lead to a good place. And so, my first property purchase was in London, in central London. I was all in, stretched myself beyond what I thought I could do. But once you own a home, you've got a real asset. You've got somewhere to live. You're not paying rent, which is dead money. And you've got to start. You've hit the start line of the game. You're not thinking about getting started. You're not talking about getting started. You're not dreaming about getting started. You are on the field of play. And that's where the game really starts.
Right. And that went well?
It did. It was a bumpy one. It was a bumpy one. I went as hard as I could. And because I wanted to try and buy something, and I bought in a suburb which was at the time not that desirable, and I was very fortunate with my timing because that's what I could afford. I was very fortunate with my timing that over a period of time it became gentrified and enjoyed a really decent run. But this place was a rundown Victorian terraced house, and I'd been in there literally for about a month, and I'm so proud of this somewhat dilapidated place that I was living in because it was mine. And my gas boiler broke. And that's no big deal in Australia, but in London, especially in the winter, it gets pretty cold and all my heating, hot water, and everything was off this. And British Gas, not the most efficient company in the world, they said, look, we can come out in 6 weeks. And the prospect of living in an igloo for 6 weeks didn't appeal. Or you can pay a premium and you can get us out more quickly. So I had to pay the premium and it cost a couple of grand to get the boiler fixed. And that was money I didn't have. That was my emergency fund and some. And as a consequence, I didn't have any furniture for about 6 months. I got his mattress, which was a biohazard. I didn't have a table to eat my dinner off. So I had my ironing board, which I used to put a towel over, and that was what I ate my dinner on. And that was the start. And it was hard. But I'm so glad I didn't use the excuse that, that's not how I want to live, to stop me getting on the field of play, because that enabled me to make, quite a considerable amount of money, which parlayed into my next deal, the next deal, the next deal. And also, I think as a human being, you learn a lot about yourself in that you're prepared to step out of your comfort zone, borrow like Billy O, barely afford it, have to commit to your job because you can't afford to lose your job or go traveling for 6 months and find yourself. You've got to get your head down and get on with it. Not have any furniture in there because you can't afford to buy it. But at the same time, every time you open and close that door, that's yours, that you've worked for, and you're building something for your future. And I think you learn an awful lot about yourself in terms of your fortitude and your ability, I think, to sacrifice in the very short term for something that's going to be far better for you down the line.
Whoa.
Hmm.
Best answer. I knew that. Jules told me there was a story behind the unit, and I just thank you so much for sharing. And look where you are now, basically, starting with eating your dinner off an ironing board. I think that's just such a great story. That's phenomenal.
I'll tell you even worse about my dinner. Being the frugal person, the budget-driven person I am, I used to finish my work. I worked at the exchange, so market closed, have the wrap up, and then go and train at the gym. I always used to have a shower at the gym because the hot water was free. And then London, especially in the financial district, in the square mile, after sort of 6 o'clock, most people are gone, so it's very quiet. So you go into the supermarket after you've been to the gym. It's say 6:37, and they're discounting everything that goes out of date tomorrow. So you can buy your dinner for next to nothing and go home, and away you go. So yeah, eating my discounted, about to go out of date dinner tomorrow off an ironing board. Not really the lifestyle I leave these days, but the lessons have stuck with me. That's for sure.
Wow. And the lessons that have stuck with you, you get into the market, no matter what it takes, do it, stretch yourself to get into the market, and then obviously keep investing, reinvest the profits. I would think that a simple message might be, or is it more complicated than that?
Sometimes the best things in life is, Anton, are the simple things, and just getting started. Not talking about starting, get in, stay in. People often, wait till it's a better time. The best time to invest was yesterday. And the better time before that was the day before. Why would you want to delay? And this is going to happen because everyone's a crystal ball reader. I'm a trader, so every day a lot of what we do as an organization in the market is we're expecting the following to happen, and you use your skills to increase the probability of being right, but you're still trying to second guess what's going to happen. But interest rates going to be cut. Well, no, they're not. Or you won't need LMI, or you need a smaller deposit, or the market's turned over, or the rental. There's always a reason not to do something. And I think in life you regret more the things you don't do than the things you did, because if you've taken the time to not get in the market because you were too busy traveling and discovering the world before you got yourself set, and there's nothing wrong with you. If that's your mindset, that's your goal, that's your aspiration, live your dream. You don't make a good somebody else. You only make a good you. At the same time, you can't then bellyache that now you're out of it and you can't afford to get in. You just got to get your head down. You just got to plug in and absorb the pain if it's pain, because it will pay off.
Because it can be pain. Financial, growth and wealth development can be difficult in the early days, and you got to be willing to do what it takes. Andrew Baxter, well said, mate. Beautifully put. Beautifully put. Hey, in all the things that you've learned over all these years, and given some of those lessons that you've now passed on to tens of thousands of people, is there a human, or is there I don't know, a client maybe, or someone internal in your business? Who are you most proud of? Who have you influenced the most, Andrew, with the knowledge that you've gained, and who are you able to pass it on to, and who lights you up when you think about, geez, how far they've come under your mate tutelage?
I'll give you two examples. I'll give you a client, and I'll give you a staff member. One of my team, I picked up when he was pretty young. He was 18. He was working in the gym, and I remember we're training in there, and I said, "What are you up to?" And he said, "I'm at uni. What do you want to do?" "I want to be a stockbroker." "Oh, yeah." And he said, "I'm trying to get some work experience." "Oh, yeah, cool. Let me know how you go." Anyway, 2-3 weeks later, I hadn't seen him anyway. That was probably down to me not going to the gym rather than him. And anyway, I bumped into him and I said, how'd you go with your work experience? I couldn't find anybody. "Oh, okay." I said, "Why don't you email this guy? Someone I know might be able to help." Anyway, it was my email address. He came into my office and has been with me since. And he kind of like, "Oh, I can't believe this." And to his credit, he's been someone, he's got his feet on the ground. He's got really good parents, to be fair. And he's got a great work ethic, which are two, I think, of the best jump starts you can have. But he's also open-minded, and he has applied to the letter every piece of advice I've given him, either career-wise or investing-wise, and stuck to it. And he's got himself into a position where, he's in a very, very enviable position relative to his peer group, and he's on a trajectory of his own now. And he still asks for advice, but it's more a little hand on the rudder every now and then, as opposed to more, because he's implemented. It doesn't matter what book you read, what seminar you go to, what course you buy, it comes down to implementation. You have to do stuff if you want to move the needle. It's as simple as that.
Take action.
Equally,
and we may or may not have had that person on a podcast recently. So if anyone ever wants to go back and have a listen to that,
yeah, he likes to chat. That's for sure. He's something else he's learned from. Nothing, no, he actually does like a chat.
And he spoke beautifully, Andrew Baxter. So you taught him well.
Good. So yeah, young Mitch is been a rising star and will continue to be. I think in terms of clients, I had a client down in Melbourne a couple of years ago, and we've got thousands of them, and there are people that stand out. So she was a hairdresser. Her hairdressing salon was closed because of COVID, not an essential service. And she had a mortgage, 2 kids to support. English is not her first language, first generation Australian, not a lot of formal education, never invested before, business income just turned off. But she knew that she needed to do something, she just didn't know what. And we got involved, and she really did pick the ball up and run with it and properly hit it out of the park. And to the point where she wasn't back at the salon full time now because the income she generates from her trading and investing has replaced that. She's a very communicative person. I'm being polite when I say that. She loves to chat too. And so she goes to the salon for the social side of it now. And she's been able to be at home with her kids, get her debt down and do all of that. And when I meet people on the other side of that coin, they're the people that are the coulda, woulda, shouldas that have got every excuse in the world not to do something. And then I look at Susan as an alternate to that. Here's someone that could easily go to the shelf and pull any one of 10 excuses for not stepping out of their comfort zone, but deep down inside knew they needed to do something. They weren't sure what. They found the right thing for them. And once that engagement and implementation happened, you can't stop somebody once they start implementing and start to see results, because their self-belief goes through the roof. So there's one inside the building and there's one outside, and both are very dear people to me, that's for sure.
Beautiful, mate. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing too, by the way. They're great stories. Mate, you run a team. You've got quite the team down there at AIE, Jules tells me, and they're all amazing humans. So we've talked about influence from a leadership perspective, Andrew. You know, all of these people look to you for guidance. They look to you for direction. What does your sort of leadership, have you got a leadership philosophy, a leadership mantra? You know, like what is a strong leader to you?
I think some of the broad brush, and we'll get a bit more specific, I suppose. Some of the broad brush stuff there. First of all, I'd never, ever ask or expect someone to do something I wouldn't do myself or I don't do myself. And I think in a way I'm not going to say leading from the front. That's just setting the standout that, you know, no one's special. No one is sitting in the ivory tower. We all do stuff, and we all have done stuff, and we will continue to. So I think that's something that's really important from a culture perspective. And we've actually got an extremely flat organizational structure. In spite of the fact that we have, you know, a lot of people in our organization, we've kept it very, very flat. I think in terms of some of the mandates, the team, and these are, I've actually, I think also apply to my family, my kids particularly. There's 3 things: work ethic, which we spoke of earlier. If you've got a great work ethic, and our team have an incredible work ethic, and they're very passionate about what they do. No one is a clock watcher. No one is about, I will get to that tomorrow. If there's something that needs to be done, it will be done. And I think that's taken us a while to assemble that group of people. And I think, like all organizations, as you grow and you add more into the team, you can sometimes get the wrong person on the bus, and then they can very quickly derail that culture. And we have extremely, extremely low turnover. Either because we pay too much. That's such an interesting point. That maybe we pay them too much. I'm not so sure. But we have just noting that down myself here. And so I think, we have very low turnover because we go through a great deal of care about fit to make sure someone's a fit. And I'm always of the view, if someone's values and character are right, you can teach them anything. But if their values and character aren't there, it doesn't matter what you teach them, you're pushing it up a hill. So we're very careful on who we let in the door, and we make sure that there's a good fit. And I think work ethic is one. Number 2, I think you've got to have a very clear intention. And as an organization, each year we have an exec away, a couple of days to plan out a year. We then cascade that across the team. And so everybody within the organization knows our KPIs. I'm very, very open and transparent insofar as this is exactly where we're at financially through the year, so people can see exactly where we're at always. And there's no sort of curtain that, oh no, you shouldn't know this, because you can't be in the same boat as someone and have a curtain up. It doesn't work. There's no trust there. And I think thirdly is that you've got to have the confidence to have a red hot crack at something. And if you're in an organization that stymies your creativity and you're frightened to try something in case it doesn't work out, you don't ever realize your potential. You never feel fulfilled. And as an organization, the other side of it is the organization doesn't benefit from any innovation because people are too scared. They just want to stay in their box and play it safe. So we're always open-minded about, let's try this. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. As long as it's not fatal, nobody gets hurt, and it doesn't bankrupt you, it's not a problem. It's a learning experience, and we can recover from it and we can move forward. We've been down some dry gullies, but that sort of, I guess, almost fearlessness of understanding that it's an okay environment to fall because everyone's there to pick you back up is key. So I think, that's the sort of culture that we've attempted to create. I think we've done a reasonable job of it. It can always be better, but I think we've done a pretty reasonable job of it. And I think, for me, that's a really great legacy, because if I take myself out of the business, which I've increasingly done as we've scaled and a leadership team has grown, it really makes not that much difference. In fact, sometimes I go into the office, why are you here today? Why don't you bugger off back down to Byron and prune your trees or go horse riding with your daughter or something like that? We've got this. And I think as a founder and as a CEO, that's a slap in the face on one thing. You go, no, but you mustn't. And then you go, well, no, actually, what we've done is enabled you to grow to a point where you're self-sufficient, which again, there's a lot of parallels with having a family. You want your kids to be that way too, where they can not just have the umbilical cord cut the day they're born, but have got enough confidence and strength in themselves to say, no, we've got this. If I need help, I'll pick up the phone, I'll email you, I'll come down and talk to you, but we've got this. And that's taken me a little while to adjust to that. And now with my trust in my guys, it's actually, you can look back at it and go, well, that's actually a massive, and it was subconscious. It wasn't a deliberate intention of mine, but it's just grown that way. And that's a reflection of the incredible organization and the amazing people we've got within it, for sure.
Mate, congratulations. Beautifully put. Work ethic, transparency, and innovation, which comes with a level of fearlessness, which creates independent thinking and people standing on their own 2 feet. And we might call that psychological safety. We uplift, upskill, and upgrade sort of, from a leadership perspective. And that's the work we do. And psych safety, Andrew, as you know, now as a leader, is really all around people feeling safe at work, not physically safe, but this emotional safety to contribute. To learn something new, to contribute, and to be the best version of themselves. So really big.
It's incredible to be a spectator in your own organization sometimes. And there was a particular instance last year where the enrollments team were working toward, quite an aggressive target. And they were literally, a deal away at the end of the month from it either being, we nearly got there, to we did it. And these guys, they're not in competition with each other, but they're in a role which is largely commission driven. So there's a level of selfishness which comes with anything that's in, you eat what you kill, so to speak. And yet they stayed back as a team for about an hour and a half, while one of the guys had a couple of tail end appointments to make sure as a collective group they got across the line. And it's the first time I've seen that in an organization that's largely remunerated in that fashion, where it's a kind of dog eat dog, and they were just rooting for each other. You can just hear them cheering. And I'm looking at this incredulously because I'm a little distant away from that now with my role. And it's like, wow, that is a special group of people. And you want to hold on and do whatever you have to do to continue to nurture that. As you add people in, you've got to make sure they don't disrupt it. I don't know what the leadership or the technical name might be for that, but it's really quite something. It's a really humbling thing to watch from the outside.
Whatever it is you're doing, Andrew, there would be a name for it somewhere. And I think it might be inspiration. But on top of that, I think whatever it is, keep doing it would be the message, because that's fantastic. Yeah, I don't hear too many sort of founders like yourself talk about their teams in the way that you have, with such pride and, such, I guess, even gratitude for, what they do for your business. So really.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've gone from as you know, with any founder, you know, if you're going to set up a business, you're probably one of the few people on the planet that would prefer to work 90 hours a week instead of 35. And those dark days when you're on your own and you're going, am I doing the right thing? And it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you're doing your best. And we've all been through that phase in the embryonic stages, and it's sometimes quite hard to kind of to let go of that, and it's hard to imagine that you can get to that point. And I know when my wife and I, we moved down to Byron, probably 6 years ago now, and my wife said, how often are you going to go up to the office? Our office is on the Gold Coast, so it's like 75-80 minutes. And I said, once a week. Said, you're never ever going to do that because you love what you do, you want to be in the middle of it. And resolutely I've stuck to that once a week, and now they've enabled that to become a reality, which, from a serendipity point of view, by allowing them to grow, allows me to have more time at home with my family and to do all of that. And again, I'd like to think I was smart and I planned that out. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, that's not what my intention was. It's just arrived at there. And if we've created a culture amongst everybody in the team that's delivered that, we can do this, we don't need him. We'll check in and let him know if we need help, and we'll deliver it for him because that's what we do. Is really quite something. And it's not even delivering for me, it's delivering for each other, because they just work so well. And the serendipity of it as the owner, of course, is that it's great for business, and it's given me a lot of latitude for other things. It's a very surreal experience. It's certainly a long way from growing up in Swindon in the UK, wondering what you're going to have for dinner.
Wow, eating your dinner off an ironing board. I love that. I love what you said then, though. They're delivering for each other, Andrew. And at the end of the day, I guess what you haven't said is, and you sort of said it, you alluded to it, is that, the harder people work, they're on commission and they get remunerated well. And, everyone wins is the message. They win, you win. And, everyone's fulfilled. You use the word fulfill. And I think that's important. People need to feel like
it gives you an ownership stake in your lane. And I think that ownership stake gives you responsibility and accountability as an individual. And it also, it sifts the wheat from the chaff. I think the last time I was on a salary was 1995. And since then, it's always been either based on, as a trader, a percentage of the profit you make for the bank or for yourself, it's yours, or as a business. And I think that safety net of not having, a regular paycheck, there are different people. Some people want security and they want that weekly. And there are other people that are maybe a little more swashbuckling, and they're prepared to say, no, I back myself. And I think to an extent that's driven the success in our organization, because you've got a group of people that back themselves to achieve. And the reward for having that inner confidence and that drive and that ownership and the lack of safety net is that when you do achieve, the rewards are really quite substantial, but there isn't a safety net. So it means that, we have to be very careful what we bring in and how we have our people driving along, that's for sure. And, and on the other side of the coin, particularly given its financial services, there are a lot of people, including, to an extent, the regulator, that would suggest that it's a conflict of interest to pay people based on what they do, because they'll just do the wrong thing so they can make more money. And that's a very jaded view of the world, that just so, people are going to do the wrong thing so they can make more. In actual fact, if you do the right thing over and over and over and over again, as you've spoken to, you call your client when you're supposed to, you have the conversation when you said you would, you deliver what you intended to deliver, that's a client for life. And you will make so much more from that relationship. You don't have to do the wrong thing. You just have to do what you say you're going to do, and the rewards then follow just as sure as day follows night. But a lot of people that, I guess, haven't operated in that environment would see it as a conflict. In actual fact, it's in a perfect alignment, because the happier you are, the more reward that they're going to make, and the more they're making, the more effort they're going to put into making sure you're happy, and you've got this ecosystem that just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mate, love it, Andrew Baxter. So what I wrote down then was, do it right and you get a client for life. Do the right thing.
You get one crack at it too. You burn someone once, you get one crack at it. It's such a heavy trust that people place with you that, and again, that's why, I guess, from a recruitment point of view, you have to really understand the character of who you're hiring. Okay, you can train them to do the job, but you can't train them to be ethical. You can't train them to be honest. You either are or you're not. It's not a gray area.
Love it, mate. Love it. Well said. And I think that one crack, people tell 10 people when they've had a bad experience. They tell 3 people when they've had a good experience. So not only do you get one crack at that person, but you might lose the opportunity to talk to 10 others over here by not doing the right thing. So that's how important that is.
And I think that's even amplified further now with social media. You know, somebody that decides to become a keyboard warrior and have a download on there. All of a sudden there are millions of eyeballs going on something, and so again, it's extremely important to make sure you deliver and over deliver.
Deliver with integrity. Andrew, exceeded expectations. You rock, mate. Cut that up. No, seriously, thank you so very much. You've just. I hear about you probably most weeks. A week wouldn't go by. We spent half an hour talking about AIE last night and some of the things that Jules, we had a bet about what you might talk about today. And so you've sort of...
Who won the bet, just out of interest?
Jules, well and truly, because, she obviously knows all the detail. And Julie rates you so highly, and it's just, with gratitude that I'm going to sign off now. But can I sign off with one question? And that question is, who do you think I should talk to next? Have you got someone in your circle or some people in your circle that you think would be great guests for Find Your Influence podcast? Pretty please. And you don't have to answer now. I can get Deb to email you if you're happy to make a connection or two. That would be super.
Yeah, no, I've a couple of people I think would be a wonderful fit for this, and I'll make sure we email them through. Gillian will be able to handle all of that from our end, and be a pleasure to do that. And look, I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. I know vicariously we've had a relationship through Julie for probably 7 or 8 years now, and I think it's been like all good relationships, it's stood the test of time and continues to grow. And I'm glad to hear that our team are delivering for you. And as the front end of that business, the face of it, it does give me tremendous pleasure when I hear our team are delivering for our clients, and long may it continue.
Mate, thank you so much.
Sounds good. I hope that was good for you. There's some stuff that you can use out of that, that's for sure.
Thank you for listening or viewing our Find Your Influence podcast with Anton Guinea. Another great chat. Please be one of the 10% of people who follow and subscribe and like our videos so that you can get more of them and you can hear more of our amazing conversations, the conversations that I get to have and that I get to share.